thing I remember about Keith, he came out of college, and for every Canadian or American hockey player playing college in the late 60s and early 70s, we were pulling for this guy, Doc, because the reputation was college players couldn't play in the NHL because they weren't tough enough, and Keith Magnuson came in his first game. He was tough, he played with a big heart, and everybody from that era was pulling for him because we thought, well, you know what, if he can make it, maybe this attitude about college players will change, and it sure did, and he was one of the greatest Hawks ever.
Keith Magnuson stood up for what was right on the ice, and he lived the way he played. He was everything a Chicago Blackhawk should be.
Keith Magnuson. Number 3, Chicago Blackhawks. He trained boxing under a former world champion and studied karate, not for sport, but to bring calculated violence onto the ice and protect his teammates at any cost. He picked fights with Bobby Orr, the greatest defenseman who ever lived, again and again across an entire decade. A defenseman with a face full of scars, a jaw wired shut more than once, and a smile missing half its teeth. In 11 seasons, he racked up 1,442 penalty minutes, yet his plus/minus rating sat at plus 168, third highest in Blackhawks history. Bobby Hull said it best. We could score freely because we knew Keith was back there to deal with anyone who tried to get dirty with us. He was the heart of the team. It was December 19th, 1969. Keith Magnuson was a rookie, not yet 23 years old, still fighting to establish himself in the NHL. That night, Chicago faced the Oakland Seals, and Magnuson decided to go after Carol Vadnais, one of the toughest defensemen in the league. The first fight, Vadnais had the upper hand. The second fight, same result. Most players would have skated away, taken the loss, and moved on. Magnuson challenged him a third time, in the same period. The referees saw what was happening. They understood this was not going to stop. So they did something almost never seen in professional hockey. They stepped back, cleared the space, and let the two men settle it on their own terms. By the third fight, Vadnais was no longer dealing with a rookie. He was dealing with something he had no answer for. Magnuson came at him like a wounded animal, exhausted, bleeding, and completely unwilling to quit. The crowd inside Chicago Stadium understood what they were watching. This was not a player trying to win a fight. This was a player making a statement that would follow every opponent for the rest of his career. No matter how many times you knock him down, he is coming back. Magnuson himself never complicated his own philosophy. He said, "My job is to stop the other team from scoring. You will never be beaten if the other team cannot put the puck in the net. And sometimes to do that, you have to remove their best players from the game." After that night, nobody in the NHL needed a second explanation of who Keith Magnuson was. January 15th, 1972. Chicago Blackhawks versus Boston Bruins. Two of the most physical teams in the NHL sharing the same ice. The tension that night was not a question of whether something would happen. It was only a question of when. When Magnuson and Wayne Cashman dropped their gloves, the building understood immediately that this was different. Magnuson drove his right hand forward in short, heavy bursts, while his left hand locked onto Cashman's jersey, refusing to let go. Cashman answered with left hooks that had real weight behind them. Neither man showed any interest in stopping. They went down to the ice together, and even then, Magnuson was still grabbing, still pulling, still trying to find a way to keep the fight going. The broadcast team watching live could not contain themselves. One commentator said directly, "Look at the way Magnuson is trying to tear everything away from his opponent. This is not hockey anymore. This is survival." Fans who were there that night still rank it among the greatest fights in NHL history, scoring it 7.75 out of 10. Not because of the outcome, but because of the refusal of both men to give an inch. Years later, Chris Chelios, who would go on to become a legend at Chicago himself, reflected on what that era inside Chicago Stadium represented. He said, "That was the setting for a battle, or an actual war." There is a strange kind of courage in choosing a fight you know you cannot win, and then choosing it again and again for an entire decade. Bobby Orr was not just the greatest defenseman in NHL history. He was also a legitimate fighter, physically powerful, with punching ability that matched his skating brilliance. Keith Magnuson knew this. Everyone in the league knew this. And yet, every time Chicago met Boston, Magnuson went after Orr anyway. The results were predictable. Orr was bigger, stronger, and more explosive. His punches landed with enough force that people who watched those fights said Orr made Magnuson's already heavily scarred face look even worse. Richard Gallerani, a longtime observer of the game, put it plainly. A defenseman for the Chicago Blackhawks named Keith Magnuson made a career out of being Bobby Orr's personal punching bag. I mean, he was ugly enough already, but Orr made him look even worse. But Magnuson was not losing those fights. He was winning something else entirely. Every time he dragged Orr into a confrontation, and both men went to the penalty box, Orr spent 5 minutes off the ice. 5 minutes where Boston's most dangerous weapon could not hurt Chicago. A commentator from WSBK-TV captured the essence of it in 1969. That red-headed kid goes after Orr like he has no fear in his body whatsoever. Even Orr himself acknowledged the strange dynamic between them. He recalled, "I remember there was a time he came up to me and asked about a technique he was working on, and I just said, 'I do not care,' and walked away." In the 1969 to 1970 season, Keith Magnuson was still new to the NHL. Gordie Howe was not. Howe had been playing professional hockey since 1946. He was 206 pounds of controlled aggression, and he had spent decades teaching young players a very specific lesson: know your place. Howe had a well-known method for handling rookies: hidden elbows, subtle body checks with bad intentions, small, sharp acts of violence that sent a clear message without drawing the referee's attention. It was not cruelty, it was tradition. When Howe came at Magnuson along the boards in a game against the Detroit Red Wings, the expectation was the same as it had always been. The rookie would absorb it, skate away, and learn something about the hierarchy of the league. Magnuson dropped his gloves immediately and attacked. Howe, with all his experience, handled the situation. Magnuson did not win that fight. But what happened next mattered far more than the outcome. Word traveled through every locker room in the NHL. A 22-year-old from Saskatchewan had gone straight at Gordie Howe and refused to back down. Not out of recklessness, but out of complete conviction that no name, no reputation, and no legend was untouchable inside a Chicago Blackhawks game. Howe wiped the blood from his face afterward and said, "He is a tough kid. He has got a lot to learn, but he has the spirit of a real fighter." Coming from Gordie Howe, that was not a consolation. That was a coronation. April 15th, 1973. NHL playoffs. Chicago Blackhawks versus the New York Rangers. Brad Park, one of the most powerful defensemen in the league, wound up from above the circle and released a shot with everything he had. Magnuson did not reach for his stick to deflect it. He did not turn his body to absorb it on his pads. He stepped directly into the path of the puck with his face. The impact was immediate and catastrophic. He went down on the ice, blood spreading across the surface beneath him. At the hospital, the diagnosis confirmed what everyone already suspected. His jaw was broken in multiple places. Several teeth were gone. The surgeons used wire to hold the fractured bone together while it healed. Magnuson demanded to return to play far sooner than his medical team recommended. He treated the wires in his jaw and the damage to his face not as reasons to rest, but as confirmation that he had done his job. A newspaper photograph taken on April 17th showed him with his face heavily bandaged. His eyes showed no pain, no hesitation, and no intention of staying away from the ice. Dr. Randall McNally, who treated the Blackhawks players during that period, said something that has stayed with people ever since. Men who get their faces broken are usually the ones who deserve it because they chose to stand where almost nobody else would. Magnuson had chosen that position every single night of his career. Tony Esposito, the Hall of Fame goaltender who stood behind Magnuson for years, said it simply. Having Keith in front of me was like having a steel wall. I never had to worry about someone running me without paying a serious price. He was the best protector any goaltender could ever ask for. What do you think about Keith Magnuson? Leave a comment below and let us know. And if you enjoyed this video, do not forget to like and subscribe to the channel.